Space had always looked peaceful from a distance. The stars seemed quiet, endless, and calm. But those who patrolled the borders of human space knew the truth. It wasn't peace that kept the silence. It was tension. For years, a thin, invisible line divided the human colonies from the alien territories. Both sides had agreed to stay within their zones. No one crossed the border. No one wanted another war. Every day, dozens of small ships moved along that line, watching, listening, and reporting anything unusual. The border was cold, dark, and empty most of the time. But one quiet shift changed everything. On that day, a monitoring outpost in deep orbit picked up something strange. A single, powerful human signal moving far beyond the border, deep into enemy territory. At first, the officers thought it was an error, maybe a glitch in the radar. They ran the check twice, then a third time. The reading stayed the same. A human warship active, broadcasting a faint distress code inside forbidden space. The communication officer froze for a moment, unsure what to say. Finally, she whispered into her mic, "Control, we have a situation. Human signature detected past line 9. Within minutes, alerts spread across command centers. Screens flashed red. Communication officers started sending coded reports back to Earth. The message was simple but shocking. Alert, a human warship has invaded enemy territory. The word invaded carried heavy weight. No one had planned an invasion. The last human war had ended decades ago after millions of lives were lost. But now, with one unknown ship across the line, everything could fall apart again. Military channels came alive with confusion and fear. Was it a rogue ship? A test? A malfunction? No one knew. On the alien side, the reaction was even faster. Their sensors also caught the ship, and alarms blared across their defense network. To them, it looked like a direct threat, a human warship moving toward their outer colonies. Memories of past battles rushed back. They still remembered the power of human fleets, the firestorms over their worlds, the sudden merciless strikes. Their commanders didn't wait to ask questions. They called for a full alert. In a matter of hours, dozens of alien vessels began to mobilize. Spaceports that had been quiet for years now buzzed with engines and tension. Pilots ran to their stations. Defensive shields activated around border planets. Their communication officers shouted over one another, demanding orders. Everyone wanted to know, was this the start of another human invasion? Back on the human side, the highest levels of command were scrambling for answers. The mysterious warship was identified as the Resolute, a deep space battleship that had gone missing during a training mission 3 months earlier. Officially, it had been declared lost with all hands. Families had mourned, memorials were held, and everyone assumed it had been destroyed in a nebula accident. But now it was back, alone, damaged, and far from home. Satellite relays tried to contact it, but the Resolute wasn't responding clearly. Its signal was weak, distorted, and scattered by interference. The only thing that came through was a faint repeating message. "This is the Resolute. Systems failing. Crew alive. Requesting assistance." The words were enough to send a chill through every command officer listening. The ship wasn't attacking anyone. It was asking for help. But the problem was where it was, in the middle of enemy-controlled space. And by the time the message reached both sides, the aliens had already begun to prepare their defense fleets. As tension built, every news network in human space began to pick up rumors. Some said the Resolute had been captured by aliens and forced to enter their space. Others claimed it was an intentional mission gone wrong, a secret test by human military scientists. Conspiracy theories spread faster than truth. The public didn't know what to believe. But one phrase repeated again and again across every broadcast, every transmission: a human warship has invaded enemy territory. Inside the highest human council chambers, generals and diplomats gathered around large holographic displays. The glowing image of the Resolute floated above the table, flickering in blue light. Around it were dozens of red dots, alien ships closing in fast. No one spoke for several seconds. Finally, an admiral broke the silence. "If they think this is an attack, they'll respond with full force." The room filled with uneasy murmurs. They couldn't contact the alien government fast enough. Even if they tried, their messages would take hours to pass through secure channels. By then, it might already be too late. If the alien fleet fired on the Resolute, the humans would be forced to defend their crew. That single act of defense could trigger a war neither side wanted. Meanwhile, deep inside the Resolute, The surviving crew were fighting to stay alive. The ship's corridors were dark, lit only by flickering emergency lights. Systems had failed across multiple decks. Life support was running on backup power. The crew's voices echoed through static as they worked to repair what they could. They didn't even know they had crossed into enemy territory. All they cared about was keeping the engines alive long enough to send a distress signal. Their captain, a calm and steady figure even in crisis, looked over the damage reports. Almost everything was failing. Power lines melted, oxygen levels dropping, and navigation systems completely blind. The ship's AI had gone offline after the last energy surge. They were moving on emergency thrust, barely drifting through the void. "Can we fix comms?" the captain asked. The communication officer shook her head. "Not without rerouting main power. That could kill life support." The captain hesitated. Every decision now carried a cost. "Then we hold power where it is. Keep trying with short-range bursts. Someone has to be listening." They didn't know that both sides were listening, but misunderstanding was growing faster than truth. Across the alien fleet, commanders watched the drifting warships approach on their tactical screens. Some officers argued for patience. "It's damaged. Look at its trajectory, and it's not attacking." But others disagreed. "It's a trick. Humans always pretend weakness before striking." The oldest among them remembered the destruction of their colonies decades ago and whispered, "Do not trust them. End it before it begins." Orders were divided. Some fleets were told to intercept but not fire. Others were ordered to defend critical worlds at all costs. Space became alive with movement. Ships aligning, engines glowing, targeting systems quietly locking on. One accidental shot could ignite a firestorm across the galaxy. On the human side, intelligence officers worked without sleep, sending desperate messages through every open channel. They tried to explain the truth to alien diplomats, that the Resolute wasn't an invader, it was lost and damaged. But fear was faster than reason. Rumors of a human warship moving toward alien space stations were already spreading across alien networks. In homes, people gathered around hollow screens, watching the endless news cycle. Some were angry. "Why are we always blamed?" they asked. Others were simply afraid. If this turns into war again, no one will survive. For many, it felt like history repeating itself. Back on the border stations, commanders stood by their consoles, eyes fixed on radar screens. Every blip, every movement was watched with nervous silence. The quiet hum of the machines was broken only by the sound of distant communication chatter. Messages filled with tension, fear and hope that nothing would go wrong. Then, without warning, a sudden pulse of light flashed across the dark border. Sensors picked it up instantly. Every monitor lit up red. Someone shouted, "Energy spike detected!" For a few seconds, no one knew what it was. A weapon? A flare? An explosion? The unknown burst caused pure panic on both sides. Fleets adjusted formation. Fingers hovered over triggers. But the truth was simple. It wasn't a weapon. It was a desperate distress beacon. The Resolute had managed to reroute enough power to send one clear signal across the void. It wasn't an attack. It was a cry for help. The signal repeated again and again into the cold emptiness. "This is the Resolute. We are not hostile. Systems failing. Request assistance." Far away, in both human and alien command centers, officers stopped what they were doing. The words echoed through translation systems and filled the room with silence. It wasn't an invasion. It was survival. Still, no one relaxed. The damage had already been done. Fear had taken root, and once fear spreads, it doesn't disappear easily. On both sides, leaders stared at their screens, wondering if they could stop the war before it began. In that fragile, tense moment, as fleets prepared and signals crossed the void, the future of two civilizations balanced on a single damaged ship drifting in the dark. The Resolute, a lone warship that had unknowingly stepped into enemy territory, carrying the fate of peace on its broken hull. And far across the stars, every radar, every sensor, every voice whispered the same words that had started it all. "Alert, a human warship has invaded enemy territory." The Resolute drifted through the black silence of space like a wounded giant. Its hull was scarred and burnt, a long trail of metallic debris floating behind it. Inside, the ship felt half alive. Dark corridors lit only by dim emergency lights. The low hum of dying engines echoing through the decks. Every sound seemed louder than usual. every creak of metal like a heartbeat in the void. For the crew still aboard, time had lost its meaning. There were no day or night cycles anymore, just endless darkness. The ship's internal clock was broken, the temperature was dropping, and life support was hanging by a thread. The last energy core was failing slowly. In the command deck, the captain stood quietly, staring at the flickering navigation display. The screen showed only static lines, random dots of noise. The guidance system had been destroyed when they were caught in the plasma storm weeks ago. That storm had ripped through their shielding like fire through paper. One moment they were training near the outer rim, and the next everything went wrong. They had tried to stabilize the ship, but one by one, systems had failed. The engines had cut off. Communication arrays had been fried. The crew had spent days fighting to repair something, anything, that could save them. When their last fuel cells burned out, the Resolute had been left drifting wherever the current of space took it. No one had realized that the ship was slowly crossing the border into alien territory. Now, after weeks of isolation, the crew was exhausted. Food rations were low. The air filters were dirty. The ship's temperature had dropped to the point where they had to wear thermal suits even while sleeping. But no one gave up. The captain made sure of that. Every morning, even without sunlight, the crew gathered in the main hall for a few minutes, to share news, to motivate one another, and to remember why they were still alive. They had started calling their mission the Long Return. Even if they couldn't reach human space, they believed someone would hear their signal. Hope was the only thing keeping them going. On the lower deck, the engineers were working with whatever tools they could find. The noise of clanking metal filled the air. Sparks flew from open panels as they tried to bring the power grid back online. Every system on the Resolute was old, damaged, or melted from the heat of the storm. The ship's AI was permanently offline, and manual repair was the only option. The engineer in charge of the energy core wiped sweat from his face. His hands were shaking from exhaustion. "We can squeeze a little more power," he muttered to his assistant. "Maybe just enough for a distress pulse." That was the only goal now, to make their voice heard across the stars. In the medical bay, the situation wasn't much better. A handful of injured crew members lay on stretchers. Some had burns from electrical fires. Others had bruises and broken bones from the violent turbulence of the storm. The medic worked quietly, using limited supplies. There were no replacements for oxygen tanks, no working diagnostic scanners. Still, everyone stayed calm. They were trained for crisis, but not for this kind of silence. When the captain walked through the corridors, she looked at each crew member with a steady gaze. She didn't have to say much. Her presence alone gave them strength. They respected her because she never showed fear, even when everyone else was losing hope. But deep inside, she was afraid too. Not for herself, but for her people. The responsibility of every soul on that ship rested on her shoulders. Every time the ship trembled or the lights flickered, she felt that weight grow heavier. At the navigation console, one of the junior officers called out, "Captain, I've managed to get partial coordinates. It looks like we've entered an unmarked zone." The captain moved closer. "Unmarked?" she asked softly. The officer nodded. "Yes, the database doesn't recognize this region. It could be alien space." For a moment, silence filled the command deck. Everyone stopped moving. The captain's expression didn't change, but inside her chest, her heart sank. She knew what that meant. If they had drifted across the border, they were now in the most dangerous place imaginable. "Keep trying to confirm," she said finally, "and send another signal. Someone needs to know where we are." The communication officer pressed a few buttons and tried to boost the outgoing frequency. Static filled the speakers, followed by a weak repeating transmission. "This is the human warship Resolute. Systems critical. Requesting aid." The message traveled through the void, breaking into fragments as it passed through storms and debris fields. But fragments were enough. Somewhere out there, sensors on both sides caught the signal and misunderstood it. While the crew of the Resolute thought they were asking for help, the alien defense network saw a coded military pattern. To them, it didn't sound like distress. It sounded like a command signal, the kind used before launching an attack. Across the alien frontier, commanders started sending orders. Small fleets began to form, scanning space for the source. Their analysts studied the message, trying to decode it. The more they listened, the more suspicious they became. To their ears, the tone of the signal felt wrong, too steady, too strong. Some believed the humans were testing them. Others thought it was a distraction before a major offensive, and so, while the Resolute floated helplessly, the galaxy around it prepared for war. Inside the ship, the crew had no idea what was happening outside. They were busy fighting their own battles. A power relay overheated and exploded in one of the corridors, filling the air with smoke. Fire suppression systems had to be activated manually. The sound of alarms rang through the halls. People coughed, shouting through the haze. It was chaos, but even in that moment, no one panicked completely. They had been through worse already. When the fire was finally contained, the captain gathered her team again. "We hold together," she said. "We don't quit. Someone will find us." Her words carried more weight than she realized. Even those who were ready to give up felt a spark of hope again. They started checking systems, running diagnostics, writing messages to family they might never see again, just in case. Hours passed like days. The ship drifted further into the unknown. Through the small windows of the observation deck, the stars looked different now, brighter, denser. They were definitely outside known human territory. The silence of space felt heavier here, almost like a warning. Sometimes they saw faint lights in the distance, not stars but moving shapes. At first, the crew thought it was debris or reflection, but soon the truth became clear. Those lights were ships. Alien ships, at least 4 of them, scanning from a distance. They didn't come closer, but they didn't leave either. The crew watched quietly, not knowing what to do. They couldn't hide. They couldn't fight. All they could do was wait and hope that whoever those aliens were, they wouldn't open fire. The captain ordered all weapons offline to avoid any misunderstanding. The last thing she wanted was to look like a threat, but she also knew how humans looked in alien eyes, as conquerors, not survivors. The alien ships continued to circle them like cautious predators. They were watching, studying, deciding, and every minute that passed made the situation more dangerous. The captain looked out the viewport and whispered under her breath, "If they think we came here to fight, this will end badly for everyone." She turned to her crew. "Keep the beacon running. Keep broadcasting the same message. Someone out there will understand we're not enemies." The officer nodded, typing in the same repeating line. "This is the human warship Resolute. Systems critical. Requesting aid." Outside, the aliens continued to watch. Their scanners picked up the signal again, stronger this time. They analyzed the tone, the structure, and the code. Some started to doubt the invasion theory. "Maybe they're damaged," one alien commander suggested over the intercom. But others disagreed. "No one crosses this far into our territory by accident," another replied. And so, both sides waited, the Resolute in silence, drifting and dying in the alien fleet, watching from a distance, uncertain whether to attack or to listen. The crew didn't sleep much that night. Every sound made them nervous. The engines groaned, the walls creaked, and the cold bit deeper into their skin. Yet even in that fear, no one gave up hope. They believed that humanity would find them, that rescue was still possible. But what they didn't know was that their signal, their desperate cry for help, had already reached Earth. It had also reached the alien High Council. And in both places, leaders were making decisions that would decide the fate of not just the Resolute, but the fragile peace between 2 civilizations. The lost ship had become more than a vessel. It was now a symbol of courage, misunderstanding, and the thin line between survival and war. In the blackness of space, the Resolute continued to drift, alone and waiting. And far away, 2 worlds that once promised never to fight again were already moving their fleets into position. When the first clear signal of the Resolute reached the alien command, the reaction was immediate and full of panic. Across hundreds of control centers, red lights flashed and alarms echoed. Operators shouted over one another, screens filled with warning messages, and the same words repeated again and again. "Human warship detected in Sector 9. The message spread like wildfire through the alien network. Every communication officer, every fleet commander, every analyst received the same report. To them, it wasn't just another routine signal. It was a threat. It was something they had feared for years but hoped would never happen. They all remembered what the humans were capable of. Decades ago, when the last great war had ended, it left scars on both sides. Cities turned to dust, planets unlivable, and millions of lives lost. Even though peace had been signed, The memory of that war never faded. To the alien leaders, humans were known for one thing above all. When cornered, they fought with terrifying determination. And now, after so many years of uneasy peace, a single human battleship had appeared deep inside their territory. Within minutes, the Alien Defense Council was called into emergency session. High-ranking officials gathered around holographic tables, their faces tight with worry. On the center display, an image of the Resolute flickered, a dark, damaged warship slowly drifting through space. One general leaned forward and asked, "Is this a new type of attack ship? Are they testing our border?" Another replied sharply, "It's broadcasting an encrypted signal. We can't decode it. It could be a battle code." The discussion grew heated. Some believed the ship was damaged. Others were certain it was a trick. Fear clouded every decision. The more they argued, the more dangerous the situation became. Finally, one of the council leaders gave the order, "Activate defense grids. Move the border fleets to interception positions. No one fires without command authorization, but be ready for anything." Across their colonies, fleets began to mobilize. Docked warships came alive. Engines roared as pilots strapped into their seats. Crews prepared weapons, checked shields, and waited for orders. Spaceports that had been silent for decades now buzzed with activity. Civilians noticed too. In cities across alien worlds, sirens began to sound. Broadcast networks interrupted regular programs with urgent announcements. "Attention citizens, maintain calm. Border forces are responding to a human incursion." People stopped what they were doing. In schools, factories, and marketplaces, everyone stared at the glowing screens overhead. The same image appeared everywhere, the shadow of a human warship drifting across a foreign sky. Fear spread faster than light. Families remembered the last war. Veterans who had fought humans whispered to each other about their strength, their stubbornness, their unpredictable nature. Everyone wondered if this was the beginning of another long, terrible conflict. Back in human space, confusion was spreading just as fast. When the Human Fleet Command received word that one of their lost ships, the Resolute, had reappeared in alien territory, they didn't know whether to feel relief or horror. Relief because the crew might still be alive. Horror because their presence in that zone could start a war. At headquarters, the atmosphere was tense. Officers crowded around digital maps, watching as new data arrived. The Resolute's last transmission was weak but real, a distress call, not a battle code. But would the aliens believe that? The commander of operations rubbed his eyes, exhausted. "We need to make contact with their council immediately," he said. "If they think this is an attack, they'll strike first." A diplomat nearby nodded. "We're trying, but they've cut communication on half our channels. They're already preparing defenses." The situation was slipping out of control. The humans couldn't send rescue ships without violating the peace treaty, and they couldn't stay silent either. Every move was risky. Every word had to be chosen carefully. In the middle of this chaos, one officer whispered, "If they fire on the Resolute, we'll have no choice but to respond." And then, he didn't finish the sentence. Everyone knew what came next. War. Outside the control centers, news had already reached the public. The phrase "human warship invades alien territory" flashed across headlines shared on every screen and device. Reporters tried to explain, but they had little real information. Some said the ship had gone rogue. Others claimed it was on a secret government mission. The world was dividing into opinions fast. Some people were angry, saying, "If they attack our ship, we should defend it, no matter what." Others pleaded for calm, saying, "It was an accident. We can't start another war because of one mistake." In homes, families gathered around holographic displays, faces pale and worried. Many had loved ones serving in the fleet. Others still carried the pain of losing family in the last war. Everyone was scared. On social channels, countless voices shouted at once, theories, fears, and anger mixing together. Some called for peace, others demanded strength. The noise of the crowd made it hard to hear reason. While the world argued, the Resolute remained silent, drifting further inside enemy space. Its weak distress signal was still being received on both sides. But where the humans heard a plea for help, the aliens heard something else, a warning. In the alien flagship, analysts worked tirelessly, replaying the signal over and over again. "The frequency is too steady," one technician said. "It's not random. It's coded. Maybe they're sending commands to hidden ships? The commander frowned. Hidden ships? Yes, sir. The humans are known to mask fleets with stealth tech. This could be bait. That one suggestion was enough to raise panic another level. Within an hour, new orders were sent. Increase scan range. Prepare missile defenses. Expect multiple human contacts. Suddenly, every flicker on their sensors, every drifting asteroid, looked like a possible threat. Meanwhile, on Earth, diplomats sent message after message through official channels. The Resolute is not conducting an attack, the message said. It is damaged, non-hostile, and seeking assistance. But the Alien Council didn't respond. Their priority was defense, not diplomacy. For the next several hours, tension spread across half the galaxy. Fleets moved quietly into position. Satellites adjusted to new angles. Radio waves filled the void between worlds with static and mistrust. In a quiet room on Earth, the commander of the fleet stood alone, watching a live feed of the Resolute's faint energy trail. He knew the ship's history. He remembered approving its mission months ago, a training exercise near the nebula. No one could have predicted the storm that destroyed their systems and sent them drifting off course. He spoke softly to himself. They were never meant to be there. They're just lost, but words didn't change the facts. To the aliens, the Resolute wasn't lost. It was a symbol of everything they feared about humanity. And so, panic continued to spread. On alien border planets, civilians started leaving cities near military zones. Evacuation lines formed. Spaceports were filled with crowds trying to get to safer regions. Supplies were being rationed. The news kept repeating the same line. A human ship has crossed into our space. Our fleets are on high alert. In human colonies, the same fear played out differently. People gathered in public halls praying for their soldiers, praying that no one would fire first. Some still believed in peace. Others whispered that maybe war was unavoidable. It felt like both sides were trapped, not by hatred, but by fear. And fear is the most dangerous weapon in the universe. Back near the border, communication stations kept scanning for updates. One operator noticed something unusual. Multiple alien ships had surrounded the Resolute but hadn't fired. "They're holding position," he reported. "No shots fired yet." That one sentence brought a tiny spark of hope. Maybe, just maybe, reason still existed. On the alien command ship, a young officer hesitated before sending a new report. He had been studying the human distress signal again, slowing it down, decoding it bit by bit. "Sir," he said, "I think it really is a distress call. Look at this sequence. It repeats the same survival code humans use after system failure." The commander looked at the screen. He didn't say anything for a while. The truth was there, but pride and fear stood in the way. If he admitted it wasn't an invasion, it would mean they almost started a war for nothing. He sighed deeply. "Keep monitoring," he finally said. "No action until confirmed." That small decision, to wait, to not attack, quietly saved millions of lives that day. In the hours that followed, both sides stayed tense but silent. The fleets watched each other through the darkness, weapons armed but not used, and in the middle of it all, the Resolute continued to drift. A broken ship carrying tired people who didn't even know they had become the center of galactic panic. They were just trying to survive. But without meaning to, they had reminded two entire civilizations how fragile peace could be. Across both worlds, people prayed for calm, because everyone knew one thing: if even one weapon fired, there would be no turning back. And so, for that night, the galaxy held its breath, waiting to see what would happen next. The Resolute floated in the endless dark, its engines barely alive, lights flickering weakly like dying candles. Inside, the crew worked in silence, every sound echoing through the cold metal corridors. They didn't know it yet, but hundreds of alien ships had already surrounded them, watching, waiting, unsure whether to attack or to listen. The captain stood near the observation window on the command deck. Beyond the glass, she could see faint blue lights blinking in the distance, the alien fleet. They weren't moving closer, but they weren't leaving either. It was a standoff in space, a quiet tension where one wrong signal could start a war. The air inside the ship was thin now. Breathing felt heavier. Oxygen filters had reached their limit. Still, no one complained. They all knew their situation was fragile. Every moment alive was a small victory. The communication officer sat beside the main console, headphones pressed tightly against her ears, trying to catch anything through the static. Every few minutes, she sent out the same message. This is the human warship Resolute. Systems critical. Requesting assistance. The captain had told her to keep sending it no matter what. It was the only hope they had left. For a long time, there was no reply. Just silence, broken only by the faint hum of the failing reactors. Then suddenly a new sound appeared through the static, a voice mechanical and strange, translated by the universal system. It wasn't human. Unidentified human vessel. You are in restricted space. Identify your purpose. The crew froze. After weeks of isolation, that voice felt unreal, like hearing someone in a dream. The captain stepped forward slowly, her hands steady even though her heart was racing. She motioned for the communication officer to open a two-way channel. This is the human ship Resolute, she said clearly. We are not here to fight. We were caught in a plasma storm. We've lost control. We need assistance, not conflict, the message was sent. Then came the long wait. Every second felt like an hour. The crew looked at each other, afraid to breathe too loudly. Finally, the alien voice returned. Transmit your weapon status and crew count. The captain nodded to the tactical officer. Power down all weapon systems. Transmit our current condition. The officer hesitated. If we shut down our defenses completely, we'll be exposed. I know, the captain replied softly. But if we don't, they'll think we're preparing to strike. The command deck went quiet as the weapons went offline one by one. The lights dimmed even further. The only glow came from the control panels and the stars outside. The crew could feel their vulnerability. If the aliens decided to attack now, they wouldn't stand a chance. The signal was sent, their full status report, honest and unfiltered. No fuel, no jump drive, no main weapons, dozens of injuries. They had nothing left except hope. On the alien flagship nearby, the commander watched the data stream across his screen. He studied the readings carefully, the low energy output, the damaged engines, the chaotic life signs. The human ship was in bad shape. Too bad to fake. He turned to his officers. They're not lying. This isn't an attack fleet. Still, not everyone agreed. Another officer argued. It could be a trap. They're known for deception. Maybe they want us to lower our guard. The commander didn't respond right away. He looked again at the image of the ship. Blackened, cracked, barely holding together. No, he said finally. That ship isn't here to fight. It's here to survive. He made a choice that many would call reckless. Open a visual channel, he ordered. Back on the Resolute, the crew saw their monitors flicker. Then a new image appeared. An alien face, sharp and unfamiliar, speaking through a translator. The captain stood tall and calm, meeting the gaze across the screen. For a long moment, neither spoke. They simply looked at each other. Two leaders, two survivors, both carrying the weight of entire civilizations. Then the alien commander spoke. Why did you cross the border? The captain answered honestly. We didn't mean to. A storm destroyed our systems. We've been adrift for weeks. We only want to go home. The alien studied her expression. There was no aggression in her eyes, only exhaustion and truth. But years of distrust made him cautious. Our worlds remember your wars, he said coldly. We lost many because of your people. I know, she replied quietly. We lost many too. But this ship carries no war. Just people trying to live. There was silence again. Both knew the danger wasn't over. Even one misunderstanding could still lead to disaster. On both sides, military analysts were listening, recording every word, ready to react if things went wrong. Back on Earth, diplomats were pleading for time. Don't provoke them, one official said. Let the captain handle it. She's the only one they'll believe, and so, the fate of peace rested in the hands of one tired crew, standing in a dying ship surrounded by hundreds of hostile vessels. Inside the Resolute, the air grew colder. Power reserves were running out fast. The captain could feel the vibration of the engines weakening beneath her feet. If they lost power completely, they wouldn't even be able to talk anymore. The communication officer whispered, We can't keep this channel open much longer. The captain nodded. Then let's make every second count. She turned back to the screen. Listen, she said to the alien commander. You don't have to trust us, but look at our ship. We're not a threat. If you fire on us now, it won't be a battle. It'll be an execution. The alien commander didn't move. The truth in her words hit harder than any weapon could. He knew his orders: defend his territory, no exceptions. But he also saw what was in front of him. Not an invading army, but people on the edge of death. After a long pause, he gave his response. You will remain where you are. Any movement will be considered hostile. We will investigate your claim. The screen went black. The crew on the Resolute exhaled in relief. It wasn't a rescue, but it wasn't destruction either. For the first time in days, they felt a small thread of hope. Outside, alien drones moved closer to scan the ship. Their lights swept across the hull, scanning every crack, every weapon port. The crew inside watched silently, afraid to even move. When the scans were complete, the alien commander received the report. Everything the humans said was true. The ship's condition matched their story exactly: damaged, unarmed, and powerless. He sat back in his chair thinking. He had expected to meet warriors. Instead, he had found survivors. Back on the Resolute, the captain gathered her team. We may have bought ourselves a little time, she said quietly. Let's not waste it. Keep sending logs, evidence, anything that proves we're not here for war. The crew worked tirelessly, transferring black box data, maintenance logs, and system records to be sent through the open communication link. They hoped that the more the aliens saw, the more they would understand. Hours passed like that. Careful exchanges, small bursts of information, no sudden moves. Every word had to be precise. Every signal could mean life or death. Slowly, a fragile understanding began to form. The alien commander requested access to one of the ship's logs. The captain agreed. He watched the footage of the plasma storm tearing through their engines, saw the chaos, the panic, the destruction. It was impossible to fake. For the first time, the commander realized they truly weren't invaders. They were just lost souls who had wandered into danger. He opened the communication channel again. We have reviewed your data. Your story appears genuine. The captain let out a breath she didn't realize she'd been holding. Then you understand we mean no harm. Yes, he said. But your presence has caused panic. Fleets have been mobilized. If we let you leave without explanation, both sides may still fall into war. The captain nodded slowly. Then let us find a way together. No weapons, no lies, just truth. There was another long pause. The alien commander gave a small nod. Very well. You will remain under escort until this matter is resolved. Do not attempt to flee. The connection ended once more. The crew exchanged tired smiles. It wasn't over, but they had survived the first contact. They had been seen, heard, and, for now, spared. Outside, alien ships repositioned, forming a protective perimeter instead of a battle line. The stars around the Resolute seemed a little less hostile. The captain looked out the window again, whispering softly to herself. Maybe peace still has a chance. But she knew the hardest part was still ahead. Because while one commander had chosen reason, others, both human and alien, still saw this as an act of war. And as the Resolute drifted under alien watch, messages of fear and accusation continued to spread across the galaxy. For now, though inside that broken ship, among the tired crew who refused to surrender, there was finally a small flicker of hope, fragile but alive. The Resolute floated silently under the watch of the alien fleet. Dozens of ships surrounded it, their glowing lights painting the damaged hull in shades of blue and red. Inside, the human crew tried to stay calm, but the tension was heavy. They were alive, yes, but they were not free. The communication lines were open only for inspection. Every message had to be approved by the alien command. It felt like living inside a cage made of stars. The crew didn't know if they would ever see Earth again. The captain sat quietly in the command chair, staring at the monitors. Her crew worked around her, tired but disciplined. The hum of machinery was the only sound. Every flicker of light, every beep from the radar made their hearts race. It had been days since first contact. The alien commander had kept his word. They were not attacked, but now a new danger was rising. Across both galaxies, rumors were spreading fast. Some called it an invasion. Others called it a miracle. But everyone agreed on one thing. Humanity had crossed a line that could not be ignored. Back on Earth, the news had reached the High Council. Screens around the world showed images of the Resolute surrounded by unknown ships. People were frightened. Did we start a war? Some asked. Or did we just prove that we are not alone? The human government sent out urgent messages to the alien coalition, asking for peace talks, trying to explain the situation. But trust was thin and fear was strong. Every race remembered old wounds. Every leader wondered if this was the moment that peace would finally shatter. Inside the alien fleet, not everyone agreed with their commander's decision to spare the Resolute. Some saw it as weakness. One of the junior officers argued, "They are humans. History has shown what they do when they find weakness. If we let them go, they will return with weapons." The commander looked at the officer with calm eyes. "You've seen their ship. They can barely move. They have nothing left to fight with. But they will rebuild," the officer replied. "They always do." The commander didn't deny it. Yes, they rebuild. That is what makes them dangerous, but also what makes them worth understanding. He turned back to the viewing screen, where the Resolute floated like a ghost. If we destroy them, we prove every story they tell about us. If we help them, maybe we change the story. On the Resolute, the captain and her crew were trying to stay busy. Engineers moved slowly through the damaged corridors, repairing what little they could with limited power. The food rations were almost gone. Water filters worked only half the time. Some crew members had started writing messages to their families just in case. One of the younger officers asked softly, "Do you think Earth knows we're alive?" The captain smiled faintly. "If there's even one signal that reached them, then yes. Someone knows. Someone's trying to bring us home." That small belief kept them going. But then new orders came from the alien command. The humans were to be transferred to an interrogation zone, an isolated station near the border. It was said to be for safety and verification. Everyone on board the Resolute understood what that really meant. They were about to lose control of their fate again. The captain faced a hard choice. If they refused, they would be seen as a threat. If they agreed, they might never return home. She gathered her officers in the dimly lit meeting room. "We don't have weapons. We don't have power. Fighting is not an option," she said quietly. "Our only defense now is truth. We go where they take us, but we keep our dignity. No fear, no anger, just truth." The crew nodded silently. They trusted her. She had kept them alive this long. Soon a group of alien drones approached. They locked onto the Resolute and began towing it slowly through space. The movement was gentle, almost respectful, but everyone could feel the unease. Being dragged like a captured ship was a painful sight. Hours turned into days as they traveled. Through the windows, the stars moved slowly past, cold, distant, silent witnesses. The crew barely spoke now. They were too tired, too uncertain. Finally, the station came into view. It was massive, an enormous ring-shaped structure orbiting a dying star. Thousands of small ships moved around it like insects. The Resolute looked tiny in comparison. As they were guided into the docking bay, the captain stood tall, straightening her uniform. She whispered to herself, "Whatever happens next, we stand as humans." The airlock opened and bright white light flooded the corridor. The alien guards stood there, tall, armored, and silent. Their leader spoke through the translator, his voice calm but firm. "You will be escorted for examination. Cooperation will ensure safety." The captain nodded. "We understand." One by one, the crew was led through the bright hallways of the station. Everything was clean, almost too clean, with smooth metal floors and humming energy walls. It didn't feel hostile, just distant. They were questioned, scanned, and tested. The aliens wanted to know everything: why they had entered restricted space, how their ship worked, what their intentions were. The captain answered honestly every time. She didn't try to hide anything. Truth was the only weapon she had left. Meanwhile, back on Earth, the human diplomats had finally established communication with the alien coalition. The talks were cautious, tense, full of careful language. But the fact that they were happening at all was a sign of progress. One message from Earth stood out. "Our ship entered your territory by accident. We ask for their safe return. Humanity seeks peace." The alien High Council debated for days. Some said, "Send them home. Let this be the start of something new." Others said, "Keep them here. They are a risk." While the leaders argued, something unexpected happened at the station. The alien commander who had first spoken to the Resolute came to visit in person. He walked into the chamber where the captain waited under guard. For a long moment, neither spoke. Then he said, "You were right. Your ship carried no war. The data confirmed everything." The captain nodded slightly. Then you know we meant no harm. Yes, he said. But the others? They are not so easily convinced. They believe your species will bring conflict wherever it goes. The captain looked at him steadily. Maybe they're right. We've made mistakes. We fought wars we should have avoided. But we also build, explore, and protect. We're not perfect, but we try to learn. Her voice was tired but sincere. The alien commander studied her face for a long time, as if trying to decide whether he could believe those words. Finally, he said quietly, "Perhaps this meeting was meant to happen. Maybe something greater is watching both our kinds, testing what we will choose, fear or understanding." For the first time, there was a hint of warmth in his tone. "I will speak for you at the council. I will tell them you deserve to go home." When he left, the crew felt a wave of hope again. It wasn't much, but it was enough to keep their spirits alive. Days later, the decision finally came. The Alien High Council announced that the Resolute would be allowed to return under escort. The crew could hardly believe it. Cheers filled the ship. Some laughed, some cried, some just stood in silence, letting the relief wash over them. The alien commander sent a final message. "Your people may not know this, but today you changed something in this galaxy. You reminded us that even in fear, compassion can still exist." The captain replied softly, "And you reminded us that enemies don't always stay enemies." The journey home began slowly. The Resolute, still damaged but proud, was guided back through the stars. The alien escort ships flew beside it like silent guardians. For the first time in weeks, the crew could see Earth's sun shining in the distance, a small, bright light that meant safety, hope, and home. As they approached the border, the alien ship stopped. The commander's voice came through one last time. "Your world awaits. Make sure they remember what happened here, not as a story of war, but of understanding." Then the communication ended and the alien fleet turned away, disappearing into the vast darkness of space. The Resolute continued forward alone, engines flickering, hearts full. They had faced the unknown and survived, not through strength or weapons, but through courage, honesty, and a refusal to give up. When Earth's signal finally came through, "Resolute, do you read us?" The captain smiled for the first time in a long while. "Yes," she said softly. "We're coming home." The crew erupted in cheers. The stars outside looked brighter than ever, as if the universe itself was smiling back. They didn't know what the future would bring. Maybe there would still be fear. Maybe not everyone would understand. But one thing was certain. This journey had changed everything. In the endless silence of space, one ship had reminded two civilizations that peace doesn't start with governments or weapons. It starts with people, brave enough to listen, strong enough to trust, and human enough to hope. And as the Resolute drifted closer to home, its cracked hull gleaming faintly in the sunlight, the crew knew that no matter what happened next, they had already made history. The Resolute moved slowly through the darkness, guided by faint starlight and the soft glow of its repaired engines. It had been a long journey, weeks of silence, fear, and fragile hope. But now, at last, the familiar blue light of Earth was visible ahead. For the first time in what felt like forever, the crew could see home. No one spoke for a while. They just watched through the viewing windows as the planet grew larger, its white clouds swirling over the deep oceans. It looked peaceful, untouched by the chaos they had faced out there among the stars. The captain stood quietly at the center of the command deck. Her uniform was torn in places, her face tired, but her eyes were calm. Around her, the crew moved softly, checking readings, running final diagnostics. Their ship was badly damaged, but it would make it home. "Transmit our arrival signal," she said quietly. "Let them know we're back." The communication officer pressed a few buttons and a soft hum filled the air as the message went out. "This is the human vessel, Resolute. Mission compromised. Crew alive. Returning to base." For a moment there was silence. Then through the static, a familiar voice answered. A human voice, warm and clear. "Resolute, this is command. We read you. Welcome home." The words hit everyone like a wave. Some smiled through tears. Others laughed weakly. Even the captain, who had kept her composure through every crisis, closed her eyes for a brief second and let the relief sink in. They had made it. But as they drew closer, they realized their return was not a private moment. All over Earth, people were watching. The world had followed their story since the first transmission. Billions of eyes were turned toward the sky, waiting for proof that humanity's lost ship had survived. The world had changed since they left. The encounter with the alien fleet had shaken every nation. Some people had panicked, building defenses and preparing for the worst. Others had found hope, believing that if peace was possible in deep space, it could be possible on Earth too. When the Resolute entered orbit, escort ships moved to meet it. Not warships, just simple recovery vessels. They guided the damaged craft gently down through the atmosphere. The view was breathtaking. Golden sunlight over endless clouds, oceans sparkling below. For the crew, it felt like a dream. The landing was rough but safe. The moment the ship touched down, rescue teams rushed forward. The airlock opened and the crew stepped onto solid ground again. There was applause, cameras, and a sea of faces. Reporters shouted questions, but the captain didn't speak yet. She simply looked around, taking in the sight of her world. Green fields, blue skies, the smell of rain in the air. After all the cold silence of space, Earth felt alive. The crew was taken for medical checks first. Most were weak, dehydrated, some with minor injuries. But they were alive. Every test confirmed what people had prayed for. They had survived the impossible. Soon after, the captain was called to speak before the Earth Council and the media. The hall was filled with representatives from every major nation. Some were hopeful. Others were wary. Everyone wanted to hear what really happened out there. When she stepped onto the stage, the room fell silent. She didn't bring notes or a speech. She just spoke from the heart. "We went into the unknown and found more than we expected," she began softly. "We found fear. We found danger. But we also found understanding." She paused, letting the words settle. "The aliens we met were not monsters. They were people, different, yes, but not cruel. They could have destroyed us, but they chose not to. They chose to listen." Her voice grew stronger. "And we chose to be honest. No weapons, no lies. Just truth. That is what saved us." People listened in silence. Even the most skeptical leaders couldn't deny the sincerity in her tone. She continued, "We were strangers to them. But so were they to us. Fear almost destroyed both sides. But for a moment we overcame it. If that can happen out there, then maybe it can happen here too." Her speech spread across the world in minutes. It became a symbol. A message of unity and courage in a time when people needed it most. Children watched and dreamed of space not as a battlefield, but as a bridge between worlds. Days later, the captain met with the scientific teams who had been studying the alien transmissions and technology. For the first time, they had real data about another intelligent species. It was a historic breakthrough, but she reminded them gently, "Remember, they trusted us because we showed respect. Whatever we learn from this, it must be used for peace, not power." Outside the research centers, crowds gathered every day, holding signs that read "Welcome Home" and "Peace Between Worlds." The Resolute's return had become more than a rescue. It had become a turning point for humanity. Meanwhile, deep in space, far from Earth, the alien commander who had helped them return stood on his own ship, looking toward the stars that hid the human world. His aides asked him, "Do you think they will keep their promise?" He answered quietly, "I don't know, but they have earned a chance. Sometimes that is enough." Then he gave an order to mark the coordinates of Earth as non-hostile in their systems. A small act, but one that could prevent countless conflicts in the future. Back on Earth, the Resolute was placed in a protected hangar. Engineers and historians called it the ship that brought peace. The crew visited often, walking through the quiet halls where they had once fought to survive. One of the engineers asked the captain, "Will you go back to space again?" She smiled faintly. "Maybe one day, but next time it won't be to fight or to escape. It'll be to meet, not as strangers but as friends." As the days passed, peace talks began between Earth and the alien coalition. The communication was slow, full of misunderstandings, but both sides were trying. The captain was invited to be part of the discussions, not as a soldier but as a witness, a voice that had seen both fear and hope up close. Years later, people would still tell the story of the Resolute. It would be taught in schools, shown in documentaries, remembered as the moment humanity grew up just a little more. But for the crew, the memories were personal. They remembered the silence, the cold, the fear. They remembered the faces of their friends who didn't make it. And they remembered the moment they saw the alien fleet not as enemies but as living beings, just as lost, just as afraid. The captain often visited a small hill outside the spaceport where she could see the stars clearly. She liked to sit there at night, looking up at the same sky that had once felt so hostile. Now it felt like home too. Sometimes she thought about the alien commander, the one who chose mercy instead of violence. She wondered if he ever looked up at his own sky and thought of Earth. One night, as she sat quietly, her communicator beeped softly. It was a message from the new Interstellar Communications Center. First formal message received from the Alien Coalition, it read. She opened it and a single sentence appeared on the screen. We remember the Resolute. She smiled. It wasn't much, but it meant everything. It meant the connection had survived. She stood watching the stars, feeling the cool night wind against her face. Humanity had taken its first real step into the wider galaxy, not through war, but through understanding. And though the Resolute was now silent, its story lived on. It reminded everyone that courage wasn't always about fighting. Sometimes it was about choosing not to. As dawn rose over the horizon, painting the sky in soft colors, the captain whispered to herself, "We made it home, and we made it matter." The sun climbed higher, the light spreading over the base, over the ship, over the people who would one day follow in their footsteps. And far above, in the endless sea of stars, the universe seemed to listen, quiet, vast, and full of new beginnings waiting to be written.